Okay, I think we are we live? Let me refresh the page to make sure. We are. Okay, it says we're live. So hello everyone and welcome to a new live demo. I'm Anya. I'm here with Isabella Kung today. If you haven't met Isabella yet, go and listen to her a podcast interview that we did with her. It's on our website. Okay, I just heard myself. Confirmation that we are indeed live. Before we someone was asking, I thought this was supposed to start at noon Eastern. Valerie, we try to vary the times to get to as many people as possible. Please subscribe. That's why that goes into what I was about to say right now. If you can, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get a notification every time we have a new demo. Subscribe to our email newsletter as well. Oh, and before we start, grab the link, share it with your friends so your friends come over. At the end of this live demo, we will be doing another giveaway, this time for an Etcher sketchbook. The winner can choose the size and the kind of paper, which is pretty exciting. And if you have any questions to ask Isabella during the session, throughout the session, just please write the word question, all caps, in chat, and then just write your question normally. I will be grabbing the questions and I will ask them to Isabella if it makes sense on whatever she's working on at the moment, or I will save them for later. We have a 1 hour time limit today. And I'll just shut up and let you work. Isabella, anything else you'd like to add? What are we painting today?
We are painting some gemstones. I'll show you the reference. Oops, sorry, that is all my pictures.
Yeah, and you can grab the reference from the description of this video. We also emailed it to you.
So this is the, I don't know how to pronounce this, Burl Var Aquamarine. I saw this gem, and there's a lovely gem exhibit, I think 2 years ago in LA, the Natural History Museum. And it was quite a delightful exhibit, and gems are just beautiful. And I enjoyed it so much that I did some painting. These are some older paintings in the past. And then, because it prompted me also an idea to do a illustration, which then went into a gallery exhibit all the way in Singapore, highlighting the sketchbook, which is the perfect sketchbook. And it was created by Erwin, and he is teaming up with Etcher to come up with a signature version. So I'm excited there will be more of it coming soon, because it was such a limited print, and it is just one of my, like, till this day, my favorite watercolor sketchbook. The quality is really amazing. The paper is by Fabiano, it's cold press. And I'm sorry, the illustration is in the sketchbook, but I did tape it up. So I'll show you at the end when I remove the tape. So that is what I'm painting today, and I feel like it's a great exercise for those who are still learning or want some practice and refreshing of just using watercolor, because there's so much opportunities for different things, like for more loose textures and soft edges, and also hard edges and shiny parts, and some interesting textures down here. And then you also get the play with color, where because gems, like glass and other materials, there's transparent or slightly translucent. So you do see, that beige, yellow, cardboard color. You see that through the glass. So I'm sorry, I'm talking to this camera.
No, is that okay? I'm very much looking forward to see how you're going to tackle all of that, because it seems overwhelming.
It looks like a lot, but I'll talk a little bit about how I look at reference and how I dissect it and put it into step by step. But before I do anything, I would just go over my materials a little bit. So again, I'm using the Perfect Sketchbook, and it's Fabiano paper, cold press, and I believe this one is 200 grams, but or in America we like to use pounds. I think it's a little under 140 pounds, but generally around 140 or 300 grams. Those are really great paper to work with, because they can take up more water and take some abuse to it, and they're not too expensive, like 300 pounds or 500 pounds. And then for brushes, I'll be using quite a lot. Etcher was very kind to send me some of their brush set. It's all synthetic hair, but I just used it this week, and it is very fun and very good quality. It holds a lovely tip. So there's some round brushes. This is called a flat brush, angular brush, and so on.
I dropped the link on the chat for the brushes in case you guys would like to check it out. And for the sketchbook that Isabella is using, we are launching it in a couple of weeks. Make sure to be subscribed to our newsletter. We will launch a cold and a hot press version this time. 300 gram, 100% cotton paper. Go ahead, Isabella.
Highly recommend it. I don't think I'll buy any other watercolor sketchbooks ever, because just honestly, I don't even if I didn't tape it, the warping is not as bad as some of the other watercolor papers. And yeah, it's just a good quality paper. And then I have some of my own brushes that I always like to keep in hand. These are, this one's a silver black velvet. And then this one is by Rosemary and Co. And they're both real hair brushes. Beautiful. This one is pearl hair. And I don't remember what the silver black velvet is. But real hair brushes, or it's almost a mop brush, but a very small one. It generally retains a lot more water and pigment. So when I'm doing big washes, I really like to use these. I have even bigger ones, but I'm not painting a big surface this time, and I have a limited time. But I also have this angular Escoda brush. I like it. It's actually a hog hair bristle. It's a lot tougher. It's more for oil or acrylic, but I like it because it scrubs a little nicer, and I can lift some of the paint up. And then I also have drawing gum, which a lot of people also call masking fluid or mesquite. I recently got this brand recommended by the internet, and it's actually really nice. It's very liquidy, and it gets into a lot of details. And I used to like Grumbacher a lot. It's also, it's called mesquite. You can buy it in any art supply store, and they are great for reserving the white of the paper. Basically, they're liquid plastic, kind of like Elmer's glue. And then when it dries, it becomes plastic. I just started a tiny area so you can see. And it will, like all of the water, when I paint a really wet layer, the water will not go into the spot. So I'll show you more as I apply. I'm going to apply a little bit more here and there.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty much all of course, don't forget my palette, watercolor palette, and then some water to wash my brushes in. And keep a rag and some paper towel handy for when you have to wipe off pigment from your brushes or dab it on your painting. That is pretty much for the materials. I'm going to go ahead and start explaining why and where I would put the masking fluid or drawing gum. So looking at my reference, there are a lot of light spots. There's a light spot in here, light spot over here, light spot up here. And some people would be tempted to use the masking fluid all over. And I do not recommend that because one thing about masking fluid is when you paint, the paint around it will dry a really, really hard edge. So like some of this part, it's so soft and like a small gradual change. I don't want, and it shows that this texture is within the gem, and I don't want a hard edge. If I have a hard edge, it will bring it back to the surface, it will make it shiny, and that is not the result I'm looking for. So I will use masking fluid only where there's an area that's really, really hard to avoid. Let's say I'm painting really quickly all of the washes. I don't want to slow down. Let's pretend this is the paint. I don't want to slow down and be like, oh, I'm gonna carefully sculpt out this tiny area. If it's a big area, that's fine. But if it's a tiny area, I don't want to affect my wash and be so careful and slow down so much that I would just put masking fluid. So, or mesquite or drawing gum. So for this image, I would put that tiny edge over here, that little highlight. There's a very white area up here, a little bit over here, just some very tiny lines, and maybe some speckles down there.
Okay.
So let me get started. For masking fluid or drawing gum or mesquite, you can apply it in quite a few different ways. You can get a Q-tip. I'm using something called a ruling pen. A lot of inkers use this, or architect use this. You can produce quite a straight line and it gets a nice tip because it's metal. You can also use a brush, but be careful with brushes. For example, let's say this brush, this linear brush, the bristles go within the brass area and it's tied underneath. And you know, this liquid plastic, if you don't clean it properly, it won't, when you use it with a brush, it will go inside of the brass. So it will cause your brushes to fray at the edges and it won't, it will ruin it basically. So in order, if you want to use a brush, dip it in Hansel ahead of time, wipe it off and then dip it. And then the Hansel will saturate inside the brass area and it will be much easier to wash everything out. But I got tired of doing that, so I'm using a ruling pen. They are pretty cheap online. It's not necessary to have this, but it just makes my life a little easier. So you see here, I'm adding a few dots. I got that line going. I'm gonna do one more line over here. And then there's a little dot over here. I like that. Some speckles on the line here. And I'm not trying to copy everything in my reference. It takes out the fun of it if I do too closely because I feel like a copying machine. Or so I'm just trying to think what looks best. And yes, in my reference, this part in the middle is super bright and super white. But again, if I put such a bright light in the middle here, it will look like it's popping into the surface. I like the idea that it's within the gem. So I want to push that value back. So I'm not going to put any, and it's also soft edge everywhere. So I'm not going to put any drawing gum in that middle area. Yeah, there's some nice little light.
I love how precise you can get with that.
I know, right? And it's not that expensive, this thing. It's, I think, $5-6, maybe. And that's pretty much it. I try to use very sparingly. And okay, see here, this is the plastic when it dries. Comes like that. And if you ever buy masking fluid or other things and it smells super bad, don't worry, the product is not bad. It's just the way that thing smells. All right, so now that I have my highlights saved, I am going to start mixing my colors to get ready for the painting. So the first thing I usually do is a wet on wet layer, and generally I want to take advantage of the time in while the paper is wet to put in a lot of charge and a lot of colors. So in order to do that, I need to be ready, and I am going to mix a bunch of colors ahead of time. So I will be using a lot of this turquoise color, one of my favorites. I'm going to reactivate that. This one is it's called Cobalt Turquoise Light. It's by Winsor Newton. I generally keep to a few brands. I'm not specifically like only one brand only kind of person. I use maybe 2 to 3. A lot of Winsor Newton, but some Daniel Smith.
Yeah, it really depends on the pigment, I guess.
They have so much lovely paint that causes beautiful granulations. And then I also like to use a little bit of Sennelier. Okay, got my turquoise. Another color I would need is Naples Yellow. It's a creamy kind of yellow. I don't always wash off certain chunks of paint that I've previously painted because I can use it again, and my frugalness is limiting me from cleaning all that off. But if you're trying to mix a whole, like if I suddenly want a bunch of reds and purples in this mixing here, I would definitely clean my palette, or not, the color is going to contaminate my new washes. So I got my Naples Yellow, and then this is raw sienna. Let's mix a bunch. sometimes I just save my brushes so I don't have to keep washing them. And that's one of the reasons why I have a bunch of brushes on hand, is so that I can do that. Now what am I gonna do? I'm gonna mix some cobalt blue. It's a warm blue.
Mm-hmm.
And
we have someone in the chat, Jasmine, saying that there's a lot of stuff she's just learning about because she's a beginner watercolor artist. Thank you for joining us, Jasmine.
Thank you. Feel free to ask me questions.
Yeah.
And then, let's see here. I will need one more. Oops, so sorry.
No worries. We love technology. We need to tilt the phone a little bit so it stays horizontal because it's vertical now.
Oh no!
Oh, we love our technology.
All right, let me do this.
Do-do-do-do-do-do.
So, for horizontal,
Yep.
you
Yep.
can see my area.
Yes, we can.
This is all where my paint is. Let me put this back.
We're getting great questions that I'm saving for later. So keep asking all the questions, guys.
Is it horizontal now?
Yes, ma'am. It is.
Awesome. All right. So mixing, back to mixing. There's a few more I like to mix. Lastly is Pans Gray. Pans Gray. It's a very cool gray. It's almost like a indigo mixed with black. For my darker tones. And that is pretty much all the paint I'll be mixing ahead of time. I'll do some mixing while my on the palette or on the paper while it's drying. What you hear right now is just me spraying my palette, keeping the paints wet. So in the later on, when I do want to add more paint, it's easier to. All right, so now I have all my print brushes ready. I am gonna go start. Okay, so first thing, this is called wet on wet. What you do is put water and wet the area you want to paint. And then when it is fully saturated and evenly saturated with water, I will drop the colors in, the colors that I just mixed. So here I go. Let me put down this brush. I'm using my cat's tongue squirrel brush. So people often ask, how do you see where you're painting? Because it's just clear water. I move my head around and look at it in the light, and wherever it's shiny, it is wet.
Oh, shiny.
Yeah.
Shiny to paint. Go ahead.
Sorry. And the first pass too, the paper is taking some time to absorb. So you can see somewhere on the edges, it's looking dull and less shiny. And I try to go over those parts again and again until everything is evenly shiny. The reason why I do that is so the wetness of the entire shape is as even as possible. If it's not even, you can create some watermarks that you didn't intend to, which sometimes can be good. That's the beauty of traditional medium. You get little happy accidents, but sometimes it can be not great. So another thing with why I'm turning my sketchbook around is the most control you get on a brush is at the tip of your brush. So if you're ever in an awkward angle and you're like, I can't reach that area comfortably, turn your paper around. And it's also good, you let gravity do a little bit of the work and spread the water around. So now it's pretty evenly coated. You see how shiny it is? Okay. So once you have pretty even coat of water, now I'm going to start painting. First thing, I like to use the lightest color possible. So I'm going to mix my turquoise with a little bit of yellow.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to start dropping in my colors. And I'm going to keep, and you see, if you ever see water beading on the bottom and you want to take away that, you can take a dry brush and you can absorb those beads of water quickly.
Mm-hmm. Smart.
Right. So I'm going to lay in my colors. And I'd always paint light to dark, because you can cover light areas and it's easier to build up your dark slowly with watercolor because it's a transparent medium. And it's much harder to remove color from watercolor. Letting it spread.
Oh, I love this effect. Oh.
Me too. That's the beauty of it. I forgot, I also like to use a little bit of phthalo on area, phthalo blue. That's a very saturated blue. I water it down significantly. Earlier, did not mention that color. Again, I'm seeing it beading up at the bottom. Sometimes I forget and it will drip all the way down. So I'm glad I noticed it. So this is a great time if you make a mistake here, when it's still wet and if the paint is still sitting on top of the water, the paper, and you can easily remove things. So if I made a mistake, for example, I do not want color right here. I can very quickly remove it with a wet brush. Mm-hmm. Just FYI, I love this part. It's the most flexible part of the paint. I'm actually gonna add a bit more turquoise in the middle here, even though there might not be a lot. Because I'm always going to be able to cover that part. And I just want some of the turquoise to shine through later on. Mm-hmm. I do really like your brushes. It has a lovely tip, great control. And people always think, oh, maybe real hair brushes are better. I think it's just different tools have different purposes. Real hair brushes, yes, they do contain more or pick up more water and pigment, and they're more expensive. But like synthetic hair gives me more structure and I can get to a point a little easier. Real hair is much easier to be limp, right? This one, much bouncier. All right, so in the middle here, you see that part, some of the turquoise is getting in there. Another way you can lift it, dampen your paper towel, and you can remove some of that pigment. All right, so now it's looking slightly damp, so it's still a little shiny, but not as shiny as earlier, and it's perfect time to start laying down a mid-tone or a darker tone. But right before I do that, I'm gonna add a little bit more turquoise down here. Just let it spread. Actually, I changed my mind. I'm gonna add a little bit more yellow down there before I add the darker parts. Sienna.
Great comments coming from the chat. Paulette says she's learning so much.
I'm so glad, Paul. Get some of that.
And I'll take the chance to inform everyone that Isabella will be hosting a $5 mini workshop with us on, what was the day? I'm checking that right now.
I think it's the 21st.
I think you're right. I mean, it's your live demo. I'm sure you know it better than I do. Just confirming. And indeed, on the 21st of October, Isabella will be hosting a $5 mini workshop. If you guys enroll, we have limited seating. You will get $10 back to use in our supply store. And I'm dropping the link on the chat. Please continue, Isabella.
All right. So now I got my, so I mixed a little bit of cobalt with my raw sienna to get this beigey greenish color. I think I might want a little bit more. Letting it drip and fall. Again, not fully always.
Is the yellow that you're using, is that the raw
Sienna?
Okay. You had people asking.
following the reference.
Mm-hmm. Just interpreting it.
Where is my lift brush? So, that little bit out. Always being careful where I let the watercolor seep in, and making sure I'm not going over too much of the turquoise. Let me bring some of that turquoise back in. Here especially, I like some of those colors. So watercolor works very similarly to this gem or to any transparent or translucent mediums. For example, this gem itself is very turquoise blue, cool color, right? And then mixed with that yellow background or cardboard color, yellow ochreish background, it became sort of a greenish color. So watercolor is essentially the same thing, or at least right now in this painting, it's doing the same thing. Make some. So I'm really taking care and looking at the planes of the water, of the gem. So the light's coming from above and everything below it. I'll be slightly dark. And it really helps looking at the value and trying to simplify, because you see so much detail. Your eyes are amazing. We're designed to see it, take in a lot of information. But sometimes looking at so much detail can be overwhelming or confusing. And then, in order to see it, if you squint and look at the reference, light,
oh,
much darker, right?
I was about to ask that. Okay.
Oh, cool. A lot more turquoisey color down here, mixed with a little bit of phthalo. So it's still very damp. I can still do a lot to it. So you can start seeing up here, I'm starting to get hard edge. That is indicating to me that, okay, you really only have a little bit time left before the paper is at the limit of its absorbency. And then there's a certain point when it's at that limit, whenever you put your brush down, you end up picking up more paint than you're putting down. And that is a good indication of when you just need to stop, even if it's not perfect or you made a mistake. And but if you keep messing with it, you might ruin whatever good things you've laid down. So gotta be a little self-control going on.
Oh, that blue is really pushing all the colors and bringing it together.
Yeah. So in your in the interview podcast I done with you, I got a message from one of your viewers saying how much he wished he heard of the ugly phase in watercolor beforehand. And I agree like that. This is a little bit along those lines, especially earlier before I laid in the dark colors. When you're painting in watercolor, you're painting light to dark. So you don't always have all your values spelled out and perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So it will look weird. When values are not done correctly, it just doesn't look right. But that's because you're using watercolor and you're still in the middle of it. You shouldn't expect it to look right yet. And instead of giving up and saying, hey, I just ruined it, keep going. Even if you really did ruin it, by finishing the painting, you will figure out what you can do, A, if you can fix it, or B, if it's just, work in progress and there really is it's just something you need to get used to. and don't freak out and just complete the painting. So I call that the ugly phase in water.
Oh yeah, we did talk about that in the interview. Question from the chat from Gail. Can you miss to keep it wet, or do you just have to paint quickly?
Sorry, can you repeat?
The paper, if she's asking if you're painting quickly, or if you're doing something to keep it wet. Does it stay wet for a while?
Oh no, this is just normal drying speed. I'm not doing anything to keep it wet other than my initial.
Yeah, I also assume if it's too hot, you might want to add water to the back of the paper, Gail, so it stays wet longer. It's a trick that has taught me.
But that's better for wash. I don't really see that done a lot with watercolor. I think because you do want it, like right now, I'm looking around to see if I need anything else to add in while it's still wet. I'm getting very close to calling this first layer done and then bringing out my hairdryer. So if I did put the water at the back, it will take significantly longer. And also if I put water at the back, like see how nice and crisp my edges are on the side? Mm-hmm. If I did that at the back, it might cause my edges to also bleed. So unless I'm doing like a full on wet, I don't really see I probably wouldn't. Yeah, I actually wouldn't put water in the back because generally I would tape it down or I'm using a block so the paper won't warp.
Mm-hmm. 30 minutes.
All right. Oh, cool. Okay, so I'm going to take out my hairdryer. Sorry, everybody.
And Zoom will mute automatically. Dang, my baby's not the only one who's sleepy. While Isabella's drying the paper, I am just going to plug in Isabella's $5 mini workshop. Again, it's on October 21st, and she will go in more details about reflections and gems and textures and translucency with watercolor. So if you can enroll in the $5 workshop, and you will get $10 back to spend in our store. Seriously, I love Zoom for this. There you go. What a beautiful hairdryer. Oh my God. Isabella's cute. Her items are all cute. Even the hairdryer is beautiful. Yeah, Jeannie, I would be happy with the first layer too. If I could do that, I would be like so thrilled and I wouldn't touch it out of fear, which is actually a good question to dive into if we have the time. Jasmine asking about how long Isabella's been doing watercolor. And we do talk about her progress in our podcast episode. So I recommend you listening to that. It's at etcherlab.com/Kung, Kung, like her last name. And there's more information there. Yeah, automatically, Victoria. That's one of my favorite words right after chocolate and cake. And okay, food is always first. Automatically goes afterwards. The Etcher paper block is not in the store because we will be selling it through our retail partners. So please subscribe to our email newsletter. And as soon as we have more news, we will update you as soon as we have the news. Yeah.
Yay. Hello.
Oh, you're back. Hello. I was just saying that even your hairdryer is the cutest thing I've ever seen. Like really? Everything about you and the things you use are beautiful. So.
Oh, thank you. It's the only thing that brings us joy right now.
I agree. Oh,
well,
yes.
You have a very cute baby.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, he joined for our pre-meeting.
Have you, as in terms of parenting, do you have any thoughts about when to? Well, I have a friend that has a toddler. I don't know how old she is, but she's also an artist, my friend, and. Mm-hmm. One time was contemplating of when to actually start teaching her kid, like some of basic drawing techniques or other things, or whether to let her kid, just do her own thing and explore and be a kid and have fun, and not weighed down by
really all. Quickly, because I do not want to distract from your beautiful live demo. I personally think that's what I think now. Might change my opinion later. I just want my baby to explore paints as much as you want. And when he sees me painting, doing techniques, he will probably get curious and want to mimic because it's part of their development. And when he wants to learn, then I will be happy to indulge.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for asking. What are you doing now?
I am actually, one thing while I was hair drying, I wanted to say, but I was hair drying, couldn't say anything, is that when you're using masking fluid or drawing gum and you're hair drying, you got to be very careful to not use the hottest setting. And that's why I always was touching my painting too, because I had a teacher a long time ago when that was first taught. She said she was going through a really, really tight deadline, and she used a hairdryer very aggressively, and it melted the masking fluid within the fiber of the fabric, the paper. My God. So you can't remove it at that point. So be very careful. I've always remembered that story, so be very careful. You can use a warm setting and or a cool setting, which is higher wind power. So right now I'm adding some using the burnt sienna, and actually just dabbed a little bit of burnt umber to add some of the dirty, grainy look at the bottom while I wait for this middle part to dry out a little bit more. Because we have a time limit. And also, that's the nature of watercolor painting too. Sometimes you paint around the area because you're waiting for certain parts to dry. Now I'm gonna paint a little bit on the top part. Once I'm done with that, I'm gonna do something called glazing and go over the shadowy middle part once again.
I'm learning so much.
Yay.
Great reactions on the chat about our conversation about toddlers in art and the masking fluid being an interesting challenge. Had you not, if you hadn't said that to me, I would pretty much ruin the paper with that.
A little bit darker. So if I'm squinting, even though this is such a beautiful bright turquoise color, it's actually, the value is actually darker than what I have in my
yeah, they are. I'm squinting now. Huh.
So you see, if I squint on my own, it looks like that part is facing the top. But if I squint over here, it looks like it's more fallen to the side. So that means I'm going to make it darker. I'm using that opportunity. I see it with my eye, which I don't know if the camera can pick that up. There's a little bit of different planes or cuts.
I have a question that someone, I was going to ask this, but Mel from the chat just asked even in beautifully worded, better than I could at this hour of the day night. Mel asked, how do you determine how much the background of your reference affects the colors in the gem? And how do you correct for different reference background than you want in your final painting? This also relates to what I was thinking, which is maybe your photo, the values are darker because the background is darker as well.
You mean this part is darker because?
Yeah, because so what Mel was saying, and I'll just remove my part from the question. Okay. How do you determine how much the background of your reference affects the colors in the gem? And how do you correct that because you're painting over a white background? So how do you kind of remove?
I'm going to paint a little bit of that color too, so it makes sense. But also by painting this and learning this and studying, that's a great question too, by the way. I am knowing how gems work because of that transparent nature. So if I ever use, and which hopefully I have time to show you the end where I made gems as a big part of one of my illustrations, I kept that in mind. And I was able to create my illustration, and it's kind of a fantasy illustration too, using what I learned about painting gems. And so let's say if I have a purple background, I'll keep that in mind. I'll be like, okay, this gem itself is more of a bluish turquoise kind of tone. But if I have a purple background, let me try on a separate paper how which is what I'm doing now, glazing, like how those two colors mix. Like if I put a layer of light purple and I put a layer of light turquoise over that, what kind of colors would it produce? And then I'll kind of go from there.
Sounds good. 20 minutes left.
Thank you. I think I'm on good speed here.
Well, it looks beautiful to me already. So, and by the way, guys, enroll in the $5 mini workshop that Isabella is teaching on October 21st. There are limited spots, and you'll get $10 back to use in our store. And you can get the brushes or the sketchbook once it comes out, or watercolors. We also have watercolors.
Yeah, I'll be pretty much painting the same thing, but I'll go more in depth about how I dissect my reference, and a little bit more in depth about maybe brushes or painting techniques. All right, so now what I just did earlier on a dry piece of paper, I did not add any water to that. That is called glazing. It's kind of like glazing a cake or a piece of meat. You know, you're adding on top of an area. And since it's transparent, like syrup or any other cooking analogy I'm trying to create here,
I love all the cooking
colors on top. All right. So now, while this is drying, I'm gonna charge a little bit more turquoisey color on the bottom here. And then while that is all drying, my last two layers is I'm gonna add the background, and I'm gonna strengthen some of the hard edge on the dark spots, and then I'm gonna remove the masking fluid. That's the only tricky thing about masking fluid, is you do wanna try to remove it when it is dry. The whole thing is dry. It's kind of like if you rub paper when it's wet, it might be ruined. But because of the time limit, I hope I don't ruin it accidentally. So I'm mixing some raw sienna again. And I'm adding a little bit of cadmium orange just to warm it up so it looks a little bit different, because the yellow going through the gem is cooler because of the gem color. So I want to distinguish that from the background. So I'm adding a little warmth to the color in the background.
Wow. Fearless.
That is because of practice, really. It really isn't any different than anybody can paint. Now I'm fraying the edges a little bit to create some interesting brush.
Oh, nice.
If you don't like the brush strokes, you can always add more liquidy water on the edge. For example, let me grab a clean brush, make sure they're clean. I have made a mistake before that it's not clean. Oh, see, there's a little blue. So, oh, that's fine. Happy accidents.
This is how everybody knows we're live.
Yay! I did that on purpose to prove that it was live. So you see here, if I want a soft edge, just a clean brush with a damp, clean brush, you can create a soft edge there. And I really only wanted most of the dark colors on the top, just so I can bring out the contrast of that highlight there.
Comment from the chat, the cad yellow has made the whole thing pop. Beautiful. Love that.
Thank
awesome.
You. I actually really like how that abruptly ends. So I'm going to keep that there. All right, so now I got some of the background laid in. I am going to work on those darker colors using my Pans Gray mixed with a little bit of Cobalt. Hopefully it's dry enough. Yeah, it's a little dry. So another way, if like, let's say my arm is touching a wet surface, sometimes I put it over my wrist so I don't have to touch it. Or like earlier I said, oh, just turn the page and then I can lean against something stable. And sometimes, let's say like earlier you saw I did a hard edge and then I wanted this other side to not have a hard edge. I just wipe my brush and then I feather the edge out. And kind of a gradient, and then it gets a little darker here. And then let me squint. If I had more time, I might do a little bit darker in the middle. But seeing that I only have 15 minutes left, might not do that. So I also want to add a little bit of shadowy area underneath. So I'm mixing the Pans gray with a little bit of raw cyan. Becomes a warmer shadow. I'm making up the shadow on the side, but that's what it looks like.
Wow.
All right, so it doesn't look like it's floating through space now.
Yeah,
all right,
definitely.
so now here's the tricky part to remove my masking fluid without ruining my paper. So what, you can use a lot of different tools to remove it. Some people just use their fingers, but I've always had this one thing called rubber cement pickup. It feels like, you know, those plastic sneaker soles. It's just a piece of plastic, really.
Oh, I've never seen that actually.
Yeah, it's really cheap too. It's like under $1 US. It's just a piece of plastic. So it removes the masking fluid drawing gum very easily.
Just answering a couple of just answering a couple of really quick questions. This was all recorded, guys, and it will stay here, so you can watch this as many times as you want. Please continue, Isabella.
Oh, okay. I forgot my train of thought.
So that thing is removing the liquid.
Yeah, the liquid plastic, the drawing gum.
Wow.
Or masking fluid.
I've never used masking fluid, so this is all news to me.
Yeah, use it sparingly, but it's good. I like it, especially for like tiny little things. Let's say you have like a few stars, or just a tiny 1 dot highlight in a pupil, for example. I would use masking fluids. But if it's a large area, I might not. I'll just go over. Just avoid it. So my masking fluid, that is removed, and oh, here's a little bit more. See my little specks. So that's what I mean, that it has a hard edge. It looks unfinished somewhat with these hard edge. That's why you use masking fluid sparingly, because you always have to go back and fix those edges. Just want a little bit of it showing up. I don't want a lot of it showing up.
Great question from the chat. How do you keep this fresh and not muddy?
Fresh and not muddy. Being aware, like the first layer with the wet on wet layer where all the colors start mixing together on the paper, I try to think more about color and less about value. I don't put in the dark colors quite as much, and then I let it dry. So like the muddier color, the raw sienna mixed with cobalt, that's a pretty muddy color. I'll show you on the palette. It's pretty muddy, right? But it helps me establish the value, and it will work with the more colorful saturated layers at the bottom. So I have to wait for my first wet layer to completely dry, and then add on the darker layer on top. And of course, during that time, don't scrub a lot, just like lay the second layer down very lightly. That way your lighter colors and your darker colors won't mix. It just sits on top of each other, and that's why it's called glazing. And therefore you can avoid the muddiness that sometimes you get trapped into. What was it doing? Okay, right. This little bit, did I remove fully? Wow. No, I didn't. All right, so it, again, super bright, but I want it because it's super bright here, but it's a turquoisey bright. So I'm gonna go over that. See? So if I didn't have that masking fluid, I would just be lost to that opportunity of making a bright turquoise jump.
Gorgeous.
All right, what else? Okay, so now comes the interesting part. If you have time, sometimes I like to use whitewash. In this case, because I like some of these crack lines that are going around this gem. And whitewash will be a perfect way to add those lines because they're too tiny for the drawing gum. And I don't want that hard edge. I want, look how soft some of that coloring for these very thin lines. So what I'm gonna do, and one thing about gouache is you can, it's like, you know, watercolor, you can water it down. I don't need a very intense white. I need just a little bit. And the reason why I don't use gouache for highlights or anything, depending on the painting, I generally don't do that because it's a very cool white. It's a kind of it leaves a little bit of a chalkiness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't generally like that for a lot of things. Like if I'm painting a sunset, I would not use gouache because it's a cool white, and sunsets are so warm.
Really good question from the chat. Ray asks if the amount of water in the second layer effect is does the amount of water in the second layer effect is the glaze picks up the first layer?
Yes, you don't want to put too much water, that's for sure.
Okay.
And you definitely don't want to scrub your, like if you made a mistake and you want to scrub a little bit, like try to avoid that because you pick up what's on the first layer. That's a good question. Thanks for asking.
We have beautiful questions from the chat. Let me see if I can ask you a couple more while you're doing the finishing touches. What masking fluid do you recommend for a beginner student?
Oh, I love this so far. This is my new discovery this year. Before I used from Backer, which is also great, but I find this one's even more liquidy. There's other versions, like I think Winsor Newton. I think every major brand, art supply brand, will have a version, but like Winsor Newton's version, for example, is a little too chunky, thicker, so I can't get into quite as much of the smaller, thinner, detailed lines that I want to create.
Gorgeous. Okay, we have 8 minutes left while you're doing the finishing touches. I just want to ask our beautiful audience to start posting on the chat so I can do the giveaway for the sketchbook. So everybody start posting stuff on the chat so I can, so I'll just want to give you some time to do that, and we will do the giveaway shortly after Isabella finishes her painting.
Right. Some of that crack that happened a little bit with the highlight kind of has dark edges to it too. So I'm just enhancing that. Again, using reference for inspiration rather than copying completely. Oh, and then this little spot is getting a little too bright. Forgot about that. I'm gonna go back in, tone it down with a little bit of turquoise. And the top is still a little light, so I'm gonna go back in. Okay, that's too dark, it's okay. Rinse off my brush, damp brush, I can smooth it out. So when people say watercolor is such an unforgiving medium, in a sense, yes, it's true. If I really messed up, I kind of have to start all over. But there are a lot of flexibility to this medium that once you learn a little bit more, it's actually you can fix quite a lot of stuff.
Can you use other inks instead of gouache to do the highlights, or do you ever do like tinted highlights, not just white?
Yes, because one thing great about gouache I mean, it's still a water medium, and that it's both, it's not a, like, okay, let me backtrack. I do sometimes use acrylic ink as well for whites, because it can be very potent and it can be easily applied. But the only difference between acrylic and gouache is gouache, if let's say I don't like some of these lines I put down, I'm not going to do it, but I can scrub it off. Gouache is not permanent. It's like watercolor. It can be removed if you don't like it. But acrylic, you can't do that. And sometimes I use acrylic mainly for that fact. Like I want those white marks to stay if I want to do another wash on top of it. But I want to use gouache here particularly because I can, well, A, I have the flexibility to remove it if I want. B, I can water it down really softly, so it's like barely noticeable in certain areas. And that's the reason why I do that.
Okay, I'm going to pick the winner now. Scroll, 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 back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the winner is Roseanne Lowy.
Congratulations!
Roseanne, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. I'm going to put it here.
How much time do I have left?
Roseanne, we have 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and we have to get out. Roseanne, if you can, please email us at hello@etchrlab.com and tell us what sketchbook you want. I will get back to you ASAP, and I will take care of you in your sketchbook. Congratulations on winning. We done, Isabella?
Yeah, I will remove the tape and show you my, well, I'll show you a close-up of the painting.
Oh my, oh, I can touch it. I can almost touch it.
And then I'll quickly show you what I mean by using what I learned from these gem studies and incorporating into my illustrations. Oops, sorry. This is gonna take a
and everyone, please, if you'd like to learn more from Isabella, she's going way more in depth about this and answer all your questions in her $5 workshop. So if you can, please enroll. We have limited seating. We've been selling out, so grab your spot before that happens. I'm leaving the link in the chat. And yeah, you will enroll, pay $5 for it, but you will get 10 back to use in our store. We will email you the $10 voucher. Go ahead, Isabella.
Thank you. So this is an illustration I've done maybe, oh my God, I don't remember the year, 2 years, maybe 2 years ago. But that was after I did some of these studies, and I'm basically really feeling like, oh, how some of the edges and how the shape works, what kind of textures, what kind of possibility of colors. And I, decided a limited palette. And
everyone is raving about that painting. So yeah, guys, if you can't do this, you can do way more complicated things.
Yeah, so that is basically it. You just study what you really feel like incorporating in your artwork, and you really learn their characteristics, and then you can really punch it up and make it to whatever you want it to be. That's the beauty of art. You can, and I guess that's one of the reasons why I'm in children's book, is I can create a whole fantastical world or funny characters and have fun with it.
You can do it. You can do it. Okay, we have to go because we have to give this Zoom session to Justin. He's doing his class. So guys, thank you everybody for coming. We will have another free live demo next Friday. Jill Gustavus is coming back, and we're doing a very autumn/fall, whatever word is best, theme. We're going to paint foliage with negative painting in watercolor. It's going to be at noon Eastern time. So please join us. And yeah, I'll see you next time. I'll leave the link in the chat one more time. Enroll in Isabella's mini workshop, and I'll see you guys around. Thank you so much. You are jewels.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. And okay, that one is done. We're not live.